The same thing, just specific to the Google location history.
So in preparing this report, just to be clear, you relied on cellular records like we talked about, meaning that the records of phones interacting with cell towers.
Correct.
And then on Google location data.
Relied upon records we received from Google associated with the homerjmaximus@gmail account.
And through your investigation, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Tell us about slide 4.
So this is whenever I spoke to earlier about cellular towers and their locations kind of following what population looks like. So as you can see in Boise, the population is higher, and you're going to see the towers are much more dense. And as you go out into the rural areas of Idaho, you see that those towers are farther apart, and they're going to provide coverage to much larger footprint.
Tell us what we see on slide 5.
This is just an example of what cellular towers can look like. So the traditional tower, kind of the second from the left, as well as providers' attempts to hide the towers to be more aesthetically pleasing via a cactus or a tree.
And what do we see on slide 6?
So on the left, you'll see a traditional cell phone tower that's divided into the 3 different sectors that I talked about earlier. So you can see the sets of antennae are facing 3 different directions. Then over to the right, when I talked about that circle, this is looking over top of a cellular tower, and you can see the 3 different sectors divided into equal pieces. You can also see at the top where there's a 0, it's a little bit smaller, harder to see, but that 0 starts there, and just like a compass goes all the way around to 359 degrees. So whenever you're looking at a specific tower and sector, the provider will indicate the azimuth, which is basically the direction from the tower that specific sector, the midpoint of it. So if you're looking at sector 1, the azimuth of that sector would be 0 degrees, and you see plus 60 and minus 60 to equal 120.
A lot of information on this slide. What are we looking at?
This is just an example of what the call detail records that I spoke about earlier look like, specific to each carrier, starting with Verizon. And so what you'll see is the information I indicated, like the date, time, as well as on the right side, you'll see what starts with first serving cell site, first serving, it's kind of cut off, but that's showing the tower and sector that I would correspond with the tower list in order to place that on a map.
And page 8, what are we seeing there?
The same thing, just an example from AT&T, and you can see how the records and columns differ slightly, but still contain information as far as the date, time, originating number that starts the call, terminating number that ends the call, as well as the location information on the right side associated with the tower and sector that was used.
What are we seeing on page 9?
And then just to repeat the same type of call detail record for T-Mobile.
Okay. Page 10, what is that?
So that's looking at how we would look at the Google location history. And so there you can see date and timestamp, the estimated latitude and longitude, and then the confidence column, which is what I spoke to earlier, as far as the margin of error that Google estimates that specific line. And then a device tag, which is a way for Google to associate a specific device that was utilized on the account that was reporting that location information.
In that, I think you called it a confidence column. Are there 2 different sources of information? And I get that this is just an example, but if you can point out kind of those different sources of information and the numbers associated with those.
Yeah, so specific to this case, Google location history included locations that were derived from GPS, Wi-Fi, and cellular. That column there is where we can determine how that specific location was derived.
And the number next to it, what is that number?
To the left or to the right?
To the left.
To the left, that's the margin of error associated with that specific location in meters.
What are we seeing on slide 11?
So whenever you get into my report, those lines that are from a call detail record, I represent with basically a call information box, so that way you can see the specific location that's mapped, what that record indicated for date, time, direction of the call, type of call, and then the azimuth or duration box, so that way you can see the specific location that's mapped, what that record indicated for date, time, direction of the call, type of call, and then the azimuth or direction from that tower that interaction occurred, as well as any associated number for if it's a call or a text message. Ty Lee Ryan body location, which was on Mr. Daybell's property, and same thing for JJ Vallow. Chad Daybell's residence, Lori Vallow's residence, Alex Cox's residence, the location of the Salem Church, location of a Holiday Inn Express in Springville, Utah, Evergreen Cemetery in Springville, Utah, a Walmart located in Rexburg, Wireless Revolution, which is also located in Rexburg, a store that is associated with cell phones and AT&T, Brigham Young University Library in Rexburg, Sportsman's Warehouse down in Idaho Falls, and then a Marriott residence in Kansas City, Missouri.
Can you explain to the jury what we see on page 17 of your report?
Sure. So this is an overview of Rexburg and the surrounding area. I didn't mention before, but you can see the dots. Those are representative of cell phone towers for the different networks that provide coverage in the area, as well as the locations placed onto a map that I've mentioned in the last slide that were of significance to this investigation.
If you have a pointer, and I realize that on the screen it's a little bit further away, but if you could just kind of go through a couple of those locations on the map.
Yes. So the green marked CD is for Chad Daybell's property, And I know I mentioned other locations on that property, but whenever you zoom out, there's no way that I could add all of those and they would be representative of the specific location. Below that is the Salem Church, Walmart in Rexburg, Wireless Revolution, L for the library on the university grounds, and then LV for Lori Vallow's apartment.
And on page 18, what do we see?
Those were the locations of significance mentioned down in Springville, Utah. So the EG is the Evergreen Cemetery and the HI is the Holiday Inn Express.
A message for
Were you asked to look at a couple of or some specific dates as part of your investigation?
I was.
We just saw a slide that said September 9th. Was your involvement in this investigation concurrent with other investigators working on this case?
It was.
And what was significant about the date September 9th to you?
So based on conversations that I'd had with investigators, they determined that September 8th was likely the last time that Tylee Ryan was photographed alive.
Okay, thank you. So slide 20, if you can walk the jury through what we're seeing here and where it's at.
Yeah, so I'll be a little bit more specific in this one because the majority of my slides are going to follow this same format. So at the top, you're seeing what it is. This is based on Google location history, the account that is associated with that Google location, and all the Google location history in this report is going to be for homerjmaximus@gmail.com. And then you're seeing basically the bookends of what this slide represents. And by that, I mean we're looking at September 9th for any locations between 12 a.m. and 5 o'clock a.m. Also, with all of my analysis of the Google location history, I looked at Google locations that were 100 meters or less in margin of error. So then we see,
if I can stop you there, why did you pick 100 meters or less?
just to ensure that whenever you look at Google location, you can see margin of errors that can be extremely wide in the thousands of meters. So we did that to basically look at the more precise locations from the reporting.
So is it fair to say you did that in an effort to be more accurate?
The locations that are larger margin of error are accurate, but it helps us to basically look at a specific device and where it's located. When you start getting extremely large margins of error, I wouldn't be able to differentiate whether a device was in this slide at reporting from Alex Cox's residence or Lori Vallow's residence. So 100 meters was basically just the line that I set as far as what precision we were looking at.
And when we speak about the Homer J. Maximus at Gmail account, that has been brought up before, but can you remind the jury who that account is associated with?
With Alex Cox.
All right. So you've taken us through the heading. Can you walk us through the rest of the slide?
Yeah, so you'll see two different locations that both are reported via GPS. And so on the top left, if you can see the pointer, we're looking at 242 and 2 seconds, 242 and 11 seconds, and 337 and 22 seconds. Google location consistent with being just west of Lori Vallow's apartment. And then there's movement between 337 and 437, where at 437, it's now reporting pointer, consistent with being at Alex Cox's apartment.
And so just to verify the time here, we're talking about 2:42 a.m. September 9th.
Correct.
And just to make sure we're interpreting the data correctly, what this shows is that Alex Cox's...
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. There seems to be some leading.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may I briefly argue?
Just ask another non-leading question, please, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. So the yellow dots are associated with locations of... what are those associated with?
So those are associated with a Google location of Alex Cox's device.
And if just to briefly summarize, on what times are Alex Cox's device located near Lori Vallow's residence?
At 2:42 in the morning, and then at 3:37 in the morning.
And then after that, where does his device appear to go?
So there are no records that I found of 100 meters or less between 3:37 and 4:37. At 4:37, the Google location is consistent with being at Alex Cox's residence.
Agent, what do we see on slide 21?
So again, I'll go through this a little bit more in detail just because it's the first time you're seeing a tower and sector being mapped. So at the top, it's tower interactions, cellular tower interactions. And then below that, I'm going to indicate which phone numbers are associated with what I mapped. And then again, with the bookend of what times I was looking at. So this specifically is looking at September 9th from 7:20 in the morning until 8:04 in the morning. The tower at the top is associated with the 0143 phone, which was associated with Chad Daybell. That's utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to the Chad Daybell residence. And then there are multiple text messages and then a call at 8:03. And then, as I mentioned before, Verizon does not record the location information for text messaging. So because of that, we can see that the text messages are being exchanged with the Lori Vallow 4652 phone, but we don't see the tower and sector that her phone utilized in those text messages.
And so again, slide 24 is a map of that coverage area.
Correct.
And what is slide 25?
That's just zoomed in, showing that all three of those towers provide coverage to the Daybell residence.
Agent, what do we see in slide 26?
So here we're seeing Google location history associated with one of Alex Cox's devices, indicating that at 8:49 in the morning, it's consistent with being down in the area of his apartment. And by 9:15, it's consistent with being just south of Chad Daybell's property,
And can you point those locations out to the jury
for sure.
and the times associated with those locations?
So that's the Google location at 8:49 and 19 on the bottom left of the screen. And then at the top is at 9:15.
And what are the I should have asked earlier, what are the margins of error associated with those hits?
8 meters at the bottom and then 3 meters at the top, both reporting via GPS.
And so the measurement at 9:15 is just south of Mr. Daybell's residence.
That's correct.
Agent, what do we see on page 27?
So here you're seeing Google location history associated with a device reporting from Alex Cox's Gmail account. And you're seeing multiple different locations that were mapped during that time window. So the first one that we see is at 9:21 and 36 seconds.
And Agent, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you can use the pointer
Yeah, for sure.
and show the jury which box and you're pointing to as you go through these.
Yep. So at 9:21 and 36 seconds, we see a Google location history reported or data line that shows a margin of error of 6 meters, very close in proximity to the area where Tylee was found. And then we see at 9:22 and 50 seconds, a location over here that is a 3-meter margin of error. And then we see 2 additional at 10:39 and 10:57. The 10:39 has a 43-meter margin of error, which is that larger yellow circle. And then 10:57, we have a 5-meter margin of error, again, in the area where Tylee's body was found.
Agent, did you personally go to this property?
I did.
Was there anything significant to you?
Sure. This was looking at Google location history associated with a device for Alex Cox and locations in and around the Chad Daybell property between 9:21 and 10:57 in the morning.
What do we see on slide 28?
So this is looking at a tower and sector that provides coverage to the Chad Daybell property and the Chad Daybell 0143 phone and its use between 10:35 in the morning and 12:20 that afternoon. And in the box, you can see there's multiple text messages and one call, again, beginning at 10:35 and going through 12:20.
And in the legend, it just has the number for Chad Daybell. Are you familiar with the numbers that he is communicating with?
I am. So the number ending 4652 would be associated with Lori Vallow.
Is it fair to say that much of these communications on this slide are taking place during the same time frame as this slide?
It goes a little bit beyond that, but
Okay.
yes.
And what do we see on slide 29?
So that's looking at the dominant and coverage area of the tower that was used from the previous slide, indicating that that tower does provide coverage to the Chad Daybell property.
And slide 30?
And this is just a zoomed in view of the previous slide, again, indicating that that tower provides coverage to the Daybell property.
And what do we see in slide 31?
So this is Google location history, again, associated with the account for Alex Cox's device, starting at 11:42 in the morning. There are 2 locations reported to Google up here. One is at 11:45, 28-meter margin of error, and then one just preceded that at 11:42 with a 4-meter margin of error just north of Chad Daybell's property. And then at 11:46 and 11:47, there's 2 additional Google locations reported consistent with southbound travel away from Chad Daybell's property.
And again, that's September 9th.
Correct.
And what do we see on slide 32?
So this is looking at calls that were made. I'll start at the top from the Chad Daybell